In Britain, there was now a national government, which was suspicious of New Deal-type solutions to the problems of the Great Depression. The government thought that Britain should just carry on as usual. We know best, a policy supported by the Conservative Party, which made this documentary film in 1933.
Behind the cliffs of Dover is a country quietly tackling its difficulties. The basic problem is agriculture. For now that our manufactures are kept out of so many markets by tariff wars, we are obliged to produce more and more of our own food. Speaking to those of us who are not vegetarians, we must have more Welsh mutton and Scotch brisket. We must have our own eggs for breakfast, and of course something to go with them. Still, it isn't possible for 50 million of us in this little island to live entirely on our own agriculture. And we must always depend upon our factories. We must keep on turning out the goods and finding the people who will send us other things in exchange for them. And we are doing it. We've regained our place as the first trading nation of the world. Our ships are carrying away our manufactures to the people of other nations and to our own kinsmen throughout the empire, and they're bringing back not only necessities, but far more of the luxuries of life than they did in the year 1900. And the port of London remains the international center of commerce. London, a great city built upon the character of a great people. The adventurer of the West Country, the yeoman of the South and East, and the craftsman of the Midlands and the North. And rebuilt upon the courage and enterprise of miners and engineers, industrialists, and merchant princes.
Despite reassuring films like that, levels of unemployment at the beginning of the 1930s in Britain remained high at around 15% of the workforce. In the United States, the figure was even higher at around 25% of the workforce. Here's an extract from an American news film which is sympathetic towards unemployed men in New York, but has no solutions to offer them.
The following scenes are life as it is lived in the Bowery, and were obtained by hiding the camera in a truck. Shuffling figures that once were men. Beg a dime for a cup of coffee. Sidewalk scavengers without the price of a smoke. Pick gutter snipes, but don't let them catch you watching. On church steps after dusk are sprawled unfortunates who must be up at the crack of dawn for a front spot in the bread line of Mr. Zero, who somehow manages to obtain food for men who don't seem able to get it for themselves. It is called a tub, and a meal of mulligan, coffee, and pie may be had for a nickel. Mothers' sons who have lost their grip on life are gratefully happy for the bite of hot food, and Mr. Zero deserves his name, for he is the last hope of the street of forgotten men.
The Depression began to lift for some in America, as it also did in Britain. But there were still pockets of mass unemployment, which concerned the makers of this film, Today We Live.
Many men who were out of work have been reabsorbed, but the crisis has left its mark. Some of the old industrial areas of the north, Scotland and Wales, once centres of great activity and prosperity, now find themselves without a share in the revival of work. The majority of their people are still unemployed, unless it is to break up factories in which they used to work. Streets which were once filled with people with money to spend are now empty, except for those who try to kill time. In many of the mining districts, pits still stand idle.
In Britain and the US, unemployed workers' movements organized political action to achieve better chances of employment and more generous unemployment benefit. Any feature films advocating change or revolution were censored. The newsreels were careful not to spend too long on anything controversial. This British movie-tone news story of a workers' May Day demonstration is very short, and there is little explanation of what's going on.
Of Shelley. Victory! Victory to the prostrated nation.
Our next speaker, Comrade Saklavala.
It is not Gandhi and company. It is the boys at Chittagong that have given them peace. The Indian revolutionaries are out to fight, and they will fight.
As was the way with newsreels, each serious item was followed by something light-hearted. Some people on the left of politics became increasingly irritated by the newsreel's approach to social affairs. They decided to make their own films as a means of social protest. Their films avoided censorship because they were shown in non-theatrical, non-licensed venues such as trade union meeting halls and film clubs. This workers' newsreel of a march against cuts in unemployment benefit is careful to point out who everybody is and to show the scale of the demonstration. It was shot as a silent film, but we've added music of the type that would have accompanied the film.
Arise, ye starveling from your slumbers. Arise, ye criminals of scorn. For reason in revolt shall stand, and at last ends the age of Kent.
The record of this song was released in Britain in 1926 at the time of the general strike. The song was popular with left-wing sympathisers and activists. It symbolised the international cause that workers were fighting for, freedom from want and oppression.
Just to win the prize, then comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The International unites the human race, then comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The International unites the human race. No saviors from on high deliver, no trust have we in prince or peer. Our own right hand the chains must shiver, chains of hatred, of greed and fear. And the thieves will disgorge their booty, and to all give a happier lot. Each at his forge must do his duty, and strike the iron when it's hot. Then comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The International unites the human race. Then comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The International unites the human race.
Unofficial films made in the early 1930s used film as a weapon in the class struggle, making film work for them rather than against them, and showing evidence of appalling living conditions which commercial films rarely showed. One of the most effective of these films is Misère au Borinage. The filmmakers from Holland and Belgium dramatised what they saw to add to the public protest over the living and working conditions of the miners. The film tells the story of the miners' strike in the summer of 1932. It uses one 15-year-old miner as an example of why the strike was called. Wages had been cut, the work was dangerous, and the living conditions for miners and their families in homes rented from the pit owners were terrible. This miner is the only wage earner in the family. His father is dead, and he has his mother and 4 younger siblings to support. The strike fails, and thousands are turned away from work. Many resort to stealing coal from the slag heaps which surround the pits. The film ends with a reenactment of a miners' march to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the death of Karl Marx. As the founder of revolutionary international socialism, Marx had to have a place in this radical film. Misère au Borinage was remarkable because of the degree of poverty and human struggle that it revealed. It only reached its audience in the 1930s through the commitment of local film and political groups. In the United States, where Hollywood was dominant, some labor organizations preferred to make films which were less like a documentary and more like a feature film with a strong storyline.
Hey, how long do you think you'll hold out? Take a seat right over there.
In this extract from Millions of Us, a political discussion takes place between a foreman who is on strike and a worker who is not.
Thanks.
You know something, buddy? This is your strike, too.
That's a laugh.
Yeah? Well, the laugh's on you. It's a gag out of the boss's joke book. Can't you see that the guy that closed your plant down is ganged up with the owner of this one?
My plant was only about 1,000 miles from here.
That don't make any difference. They're organized. Get that. Organized. They don't have to see each other to get together. They've got chambers of commerce, militia, law and order. They've got the whole setup right in their vest pocket. When business takes a nosedive, they take it easy. And you and I take the air.
That's right. What's the answer?
Millions of us getting together. That's the answer. We want a man-sized hunk of everything our hands have made. And just think, buddy, that's the whole cockeyed country. Everything that's in it, our hands made. Every rivet and bolt and brick, you betcha. Our hands worked and scraped to build all those things. Every bit of them. But who owns them? Who gets the gravy? Not you. Not me. Oh, no. We built them, but we don't own them.
Millions of Us argues that the problems of unemployment will only be resolved if the workers unite to build a socialist America. In this program, we've seen that unofficial films made for a workers' audience could offer solutions to the problems of the Great Depression, which films made for a general cinema audience usually failed to do.